Hello guys, this is Mendel here speaking. Here is my current project. I've upgraded my graphics card from the 4870 512 MB card to the Radeon 5870 1GB card. Here you can see some of the theoretical differences between the cards on GPU-C program. Pretty much double everything on the new card compared to the old one, except maybe the bandwidth isn't quite double, but it's improved. So here's the card. It's quite a beast, isn't it? And here you can see the card installed to my system. I have to do a little bit of rerouting of cables to make it fit in there, and I had a little bit of trouble with that, but in the end I managed to put it in there. So here, first benchmark of the day. On the old card, the 3D Mark Vantage Test 1, and as you can see the frame rate is dipping way below 10 frames per second, whereas on the new card here frame rate starts at 20 frames per second and it stays well above 10 frames per second. It goes to the teens, but never hits below 10 frames per second. And here you can see on the left the 4870, on the right the 5870, and you can see the difference in frame rate. Moving on in the test, here we have again a sequence on the 4870, and the frame rate is dipping to somewhere along the lines of 3 frames per second at worst. And on the new card it's a little bit better, still not butter smooth, but it never goes below 6 frames per second, so at worst it's double. And here in the next sequence, this girl is called Jane Nash, and she is moving into this vehicle, and as you can see the frame rate is almost double all the time on the new card on the right, whereas the old card on the left is struggling a little bit more. Frame rate going to slideshow on the old card, whereas the new card maintains some kind of smoothness in the picture. Moving on to the other test, test number 2, first on the old card, and moving on to the new card. You can see on the old card the frame rate was something like 5 frames per second and 10 frames per second on the new one, so it's double the performance. Side by side, then 4870 on the left and the 5870 on the right, there's like 60% or 80% difference, and the new card never dips below 10 frames per second, whereas the old card is there quite often. Even the 4870 manages to put up respectable performance in some places, but it's all the time quite a bit slower than the 5870. Here on the 4870 you can see at times the frame rate goes to something along the lines of 4 frames per second, and that's really not too good. The card just doesn't have the shading power necessary for this sequence, so there you go. On the new card then, starting at 9 frames per second, where the other card was 4 or 5, so pretty much double the performance again on the 5870, which is pretty much in line with the theoretical differences between the cards. And here again on the left it's the 4870, on the right it's the 5870, and on the old card the frame rate is at 11 in this sequence. The mothership is going to shoot some missiles at the planet in this sequence, and the explosion is quite nice actually. We'll see how it performs on the 4870 here. During the explosion the frame rate goes to 8 or 9 frames per second and stays there just under the 10 frames per second mark, Whereas on the new card, we're starting the sequence in 14 frames per second. Missiles are being fired, and let's see if it ever dips below 10 frames per second. Probably not. So let's see the rest of the benchmark, and here again the old card on the left, the new one on the right. New one seems to be smooth, whereas the old one just wasn't smooth. 4 frames per second versus 12 frames per second at some places, it would seem like. And here again the old card showing some nice spaceships at 6 frames per second, whereas the new card performs a lot better. For some reason in this asteroid field the difference is even more than in other parts of this second test of 3D Mark Vantage. So moving on, here are some 3D Mark 06 theoretical tests, and then we move on to Crysis, where the 4870 is trying to play in 1080p resolution with 4 times anti-aliasing, and it's not performing playable at all. Moving on to the new card 10 in the same sequence, you can see the frame rate is smoother. It's over 20 frames per second, and there would be no trouble playing it like this. Later on in the test, the 4870 on the left actually performs a little bit better. It's almost playable but not quite, while on the right the 5870 is performing very well indeed. And you can still see the difference, you can feel the difference. You don't need to see any numbers to appreciate the differences. Here on Need for Speed Shift, the old card, never mind my crappy green car, the old car performs sluggishly, whereas the 5870 seems to bring somewhat smooth frame rates. Let's see when we start the car. Oh my god, on the 4870 the frame rate is just horrible. There's no way you can play it like this. I can't keep the car straight, I can't maneuver the car at all, it's just horrible. This is 2560 times 1600, 4 times anti-aliasing, and on the new card it performs exceptionally well. As you can see, I can actually try. Oh no, I'm not really good at this, but at least I can't blame the frame rates anymore. 4870 on the left, 5870 on the right. Just look at this, it's night and day difference. It's the difference between being able to play the game or not. And oh, I still can't drive the car even if the performance is better. Oh, actually that cut was beneficial. I'm driving second, whereas on the old card I couldn't keep up with the other cars because the performance was like this. Sluggish, sluggish, sluggish. Can't control the car, can't follow the road, can't do anything but this. So I think you've seen the differences. The 5870 performing a lot better than the old 4870. I think this upgrade was worth it. What do you think?
So don't mess my hair. If all you do is fake it, don't